My name is Daniel Myers. I'm 34 years old, and an entitled tenant just tried to guilt trip me into selling one of my rental properties so her daughter could go to college, and when I refused, she made it her mission to destroy my life. I come from a small, working-class town in Indiana. My dad laid bricks, my mom worked in a school cafeteria, and we lived paycheck to paycheck. They were the kind of people who thought owning a home was a pipe dream, who wore the same coat for 10 years, who quietly skipped meals so their kids wouldn't have to. I remember watching them at the kitchen table after dinner, bills laid out like a battlefield calculator between them like a ticking bomb. It broke something in me. Or maybe it forged something. I swore I'd never live that life. I saved. I studied. I worked 3 jobs through college. I met Rachel, now my wife, during my sophomore year. She was studying finance, and she was sharper than any professor I ever had. Her mom raised her solo and taught her how to stretch a dime until it screamed. We shared a dream to buy homes, fix them up, and build something we never had growing up. Over the years, we did just that. Every bonus check, every raise, every tax refund, we put it all into the next property. We painted walls ourselves, scrubbed grout until our knuckles bled, lived with broken water heaters to save a few grand. Now we own 6 properties. They're modest homes, nothing fancy, but they represent sweat sacrifice and Saturdays lost to drywall dust. They also represent security for us, for our kids, and for the life we've built. That brings me to Emily. Emily's 40, a single mom. And she's been renting one of my homes for about 5 years. It's a decent 3-bedroom in a good part of town close to a top-rated high school. I rented it to her for below market value because she seemed like a decent person, and I remembered my own mom scraping to make rent. She always paid on time, sent polite holiday texts, even baked cookies once for my kids. I never raised her rent, not once. Then 3 months ago, Emily called and asked to meet. I figured something was wrong with the plumbing again. Instead, I walked into the living room and got blindsided. She poured coffee, sat me down, and started thanking me for all I'd done for her, how I'd given her a break on rent, helped her stay in a good school district, and been like family. I should have known right then. The compliments were just frosting on a rotten cake. Then she said her daughter Lily had gotten into a top-tier out-of-state university. Full ride? Nope. Just a 10% scholarship. Emily started crying, telling me how she'd picked up a second job, applied for aid, begged relatives, nothing was enough. I nodded, genuinely sympathetic. College is brutal, I get it. I thought maybe she was going to ask for a rent delay. What she asked for instead, sell the house. The one she was living in, just sell it, so she could use the money to pay for Lily's college. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She pulled out a manila folder with comps and an unofficial appraisal she'd gotten online showing how much the house could sell for. You could pay off her whole tuition, she said, eyes wide. Think of the difference you could make. I asked her if she'd lost her mind. She said, dead serious, it's just one house. You've got others. My mouth went dry. That house was the first property Rachel and I bought together. We painted it ourselves the week before our wedding. My daughter took her first steps on its porch before we rented it out. It wasn't just one house. I told her no as gently as I could, that I understood how hard this was, but this wasn't my responsibility. Emily's expression changed. The warm gratitude vanished. I thought you were better than this, she snapped. I thought you cared about people. I left before I said something I'd regret. Thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, she stopped paying rent. Until we can talk like adults, she said in a voicemail. She left notes on my truck. Showed up unannounced at another property I was managing. But worse, she went public. She made a Facebook post that started with single mom just trying to get her daughter to college while my greedy landlord crushes her dreams. She named me, tagged me, used a picture of the house. People believed her. The post went semi-viral in our local circle. A pastor shared it. So did the owner of a daycare we used to take our son to. Rachel got stopped at the grocery store by someone asking why we were hoarding wealth. One of our daughter's classmates told her, "Your dad's the reason my cousin can't go to school." The school had to call us about bullying. I was painted as some kind of real estate vampire sucking the life out of single mothers. The whole time, Emily kept pushing. She emailed Rachel begging her to talk sense into your husband. She wrote a letter addressed to our kids telling them to be on the right side of history. I was done being polite. I called our attorney. We drafted a cease and desist. Emily ignored it. Doubled down, went on a local moms group page and accused me of trying to evict her to make a quick buck. That's when I decided if she wants war, she'll get it. I'm done being the nice guy. I spent years breaking my back for this life, and I'm not going to let someone guilt me into throwing it away because she refuses to take no for an answer. I'm taking her to court, and I'm not stopping until my name and my kids' names are cleared. You want to use my house for sympathy points? Fine, but now you'll get to explain your lies on record, under oath. Good luck, Emily. You picked the wrong person to play victim with. After the cease and desist letter failed to scare her off, I stopped playing defense and started documenting everything. Every missed rent payment, every text, voicemail, email. I began treating every word from Emily like it could be used in a deposition because at this point it probably would. I didn't respond to her anymore. I didn't go near the property unless absolutely necessary. The house I once poured sweat into started to feel like a landmine. My wife Rachel tried once more to reach out, thinking maybe a calm voice would help. She left the conversation shaken, telling me Emily had gone full tilt. According to her, Emily sat on the porch, arms crossed, waiting like she expected someone to grovel. She launched into this dramatic tirade about injustice, the power imbalance, how men like your husband build wealth off the backs of struggling women, how Lily was the future of the country and we were personally holding her back. Rachel said she kept her cool, but when she gently reminded Emily that she'd been paying below-market rent for 5 years, Emily rolled her eyes and said, "That was just the bare minimum of decency." That night, Rachel and I sat in the living room in silence. I stared at my old toolbox near the door and realized I hadn't felt safe entering one of my own homes in over a month. I started to withdraw not just from Emily, but from everything tied to that house. I didn't drive past it anymore. I stopped checking in with the tenants next door. And it wasn't just me, our daughter Emma didn't want to go to school some mornings. She'd say her stomach hurt, but I knew it wasn't physical. It was kids repeating garbage they'd heard from their parents. Rachel asked her one day what was going on, and she finally blurted out, "People say you and Daddy are stealing a girl's college money. She's 9 years old and already bearing the weight of someone else's manipulative narrative." That was the moment my withdrawal hardened into resolve. No more empathy, no more understanding. I stopped responding to neighbors who just wanted to understand both sides. I stopped defending myself at the hardware store or during school drop-off. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I started putting locks on my other properties, installed cameras, changed routines. The world had shrunk down to Rachel, our kids, and a strategy for survival. Emily didn't back off. In fact, she escalated. When rent for a second month went unpaid, we served her with an official notice. She ignored it. That same week, I found my name tagged in a post where she accused me of evicting a child for daring to dream. The caption read like a soap opera script. Imagine being 18, accepted to your dream school, and watching your landlord ruin everything because he's afraid of compassion. People ate it up. She posted photos of Lily crying next to cardboard boxes as if we'd already kicked them out. We hadn't. She hadn't even responded to the notice yet. At that point, some mutual friends people I hadn't spoken to in years started chiming in online. We always knew Daniel was cold. He hides behind his money. Why can't he just sell one house? I started screenshotting everything. My attorney said, let them dig their own grave. But I couldn't lie, it got to me. I'd walk into the grocery store and feel eyes on me. One guy muttered slumlord under his breath as I passed. Another woman I'd helped years ago with a busted pipe asked Rachel at church, "Is it true your husband's evicting that poor girl for trying to go to college?" We stopped going to church. We started ordering groceries online. My world had gotten smaller and colder, all because I refused to fund someone else's dream. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just this cold, humming numbness. Meanwhile, Emily was relentless. She sent Lily to knock on our front door one night with a handwritten letter asking if I would please reconsider for the sake of her future. I didn't open it. I slipped it into a file folder labeled Evidence. That same weekend, I found out Emily had approached one of my tenants in another property and asked if they thought I was planning to sell out from under all of them. She was poisoning my name like it was a sport. I told my attorney, and he said it was time to prepare for court. We'd exhausted polite boundaries. Now it was about preserving legal and financial safety. I felt like I had been cornered in a fight I never asked for, one where the punches were smiles and hashtags and half-truths shared in comment threads. But Emily didn't care about the truth. She cared about pressure. And when the pressure didn't work, she turned to invasion. I came home one afternoon to find Rachel staring at her phone. Her face was pale. She held it out and showed me a video posted by Emily. She had filmed the outside of our house. Our kids' bikes were visible, our front door. She narrated it like some twisted true crime segment, talking about how this is where the family who could change everything lives but chooses not to. I saw red. Rachel called the police immediately, and they said they couldn't do much unless she stepped on our property. I sent the video to our attorney. He said it would help the defamation case. But even with that, we knew the damage had already been done. People weren't looking for truth, they were looking for villains, and Emily gave them one with a convenient zip code. My parents, who had once been proud of my real estate work, now whispered to me on the phone, "Maybe you could help her a little, just a loan." I didn't scream. I didn't even argue. I just hung up. I realized then how little people understood the difference between generosity and submission. Helping someone is a choice. Being guilted into sacrificing your family's security is not. The final straw came when I checked the local news app and saw a story titled "David versus Goliath: One Local Student's Fight to Attend Her Dream School." The article featured Emily and Lily, and a blurred photo of my property. The piece was full of holes, no mention of the years of subsidized rent, the refusal to pay the smear campaign. Just a heartstring narrative with a bad guy in a button-down shirt. My phone buzzed for hours. I ignored it. That night, Rachel and I sat in the dark, drinking tea we didn't want. "We didn't deserve this," she whispered. I nodded. And in that stillness, in that quiet detachment from a community that had turned its back on us, I felt something shift. Not fear, not sadness, just the cold, focused clarity that comes right before a storm. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to fight back, not with rage, but with facts, with law, with every thread of truth Emily had tried to twist. She wanted a villain. She's about to meet one with a lawyer. By the time we officially filed the lawsuit, Emily had transformed from a struggling tenant to a self-declared martyr. Her social media pages were filled with curated hardship, the same 5 photos of Lily at her laptop, the same video of her pretending to box up belongings like eviction was imminent. But in real life, she hadn't packed a single thing. She was still in my house, still not paying rent. And now she was ramping up her narrative with bold new fabrications. My lawyer, Matthew, a quiet man who believed in paperwork more than drama, told me we needed to prepare for the worst. "People like her don't fold," he said. "They escalate until they burn everything down, including themselves." We started collecting everything. Emails, texts, voicemail transcripts. I even dug through an old hard drive for a lease document she had digitally signed 5 years ago that included the original rent discount and clause about defamation. Meanwhile, a surprise ally emerged. Claire, a mutual acquaintance who'd once been friends with Emily before she got too intense in her words. Claire reached out via a burner email, said she was tired of watching the lies, and offered to meet anonymously. She didn't want to be involved legally, but gave us a treasure trove of screenshots, private group chats where Emily openly bragged about guilt-tripping the landlord, texts where she admitted she'd never asked her own family for help because they'd just give Lily bad advice, and one particularly infuriating message that said, "He's too scared to fight me. I'll win this in the court of public opinion." Claire also told us something that changed everything. Emily had started a GoFundMe with a fabricated backstory, one that included an alleged promise from me to sell her the house for a discount to help fund Lily's future. The page was filled with exaggerations and outright lies, including a forged screenshot of an email where I supposedly said, "We'll work something out if Lily gets in." I never sent that email. I never even typed those words. We brought in a digital forensics expert who confirmed the image had been doctored. That same day, Matthew had me sit with him to go over a game plan. He was building a case that would show not only breach of lease and defamation, but also willful public misrepresentation and emotional distress inflicted on my family, especially our kids. I didn't want to think about Emma crying because of what classmates repeated from their mom's Facebook rants. But I kept that pain with me like armor. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was protecting everything we'd built. Meanwhile, Emily began playing both sides. She sent me a text, short, almost clinical, saying she'd be willing to settle out of court if I agreed to donate an amount equivalent to 2 years' tuition in exchange for her dropping the public accusations. I read it 3 times before forwarding it to Matthew. "That's not a settlement," he said. "That's blackmail." We kept building. Rachel remembered she had an old voicemail saved from the first year Emily lived there, thanking us for keeping the rent so low and saying we had saved her and Lily's future. We labeled every file, every date. We created timelines, printed photos, built a binder thick enough to level a coffee table. Then Emily filed a countersuit. She claimed emotional harassment, financial discrimination, and retaliatory eviction. Her lawyer argued I was punishing her for seeking help publicly. The moment I read the first paragraph of their filing, I felt a heat rise in my chest. She painted herself as the David to my Goliath, the single mother up against the monstrous landlord with multiple properties and little compassion. She claimed she had no choice but to go public because I had threatened to evict her for asking a question. It was a lie, and we had the paper trail to prove it. Matthew and I prepped for court like it was war. We had a witness list, Rachel Clare, who reluctantly agreed to testify under subpoena, and even one of my longtime tenants from another property who testified about Emily's attempts to sway them with sob stories. But then came the biggest twist. Emily showed up with her own surprise witness, a man named Travis, introduced as an old friend of mine. Except I'd never seen this man in my life. He took the stand and claimed he'd been present during a conversation between me and Emily where I agreed to sell her the house if her daughter got into college. It was like watching a badly written play performed in a courtroom. The judge allowed cross-examination, and Matthew shredded him. Travis couldn't name the date of the conversation. He couldn't describe my car. He got my wife's name wrong. When asked for any text messages or photos proving their friendship, he stammered that he'd deleted his phone recently. The moment was so transparently false that even the court reporter rolled her eyes. But still, damage had been done. The jury looked rattled. So, we responded. Matthew introduced digital evidence showing the only communication between Emily and me during the entire college application window was a string of increasingly aggressive texts from her begging for money and my repeated refusals. Then we introduced the GoFundMe metadata proof that Emily started the campaign before the alleged conversation ever took place. Our forensic expert walked the court through the digital footprint of the faked email, even highlighting the mismatched timestamps and inconsistencies in the font rendering. Every lie unraveled fiber by fiber. Finally, we brought in Emma's school counselor, who testified under oath about the bullying our daughter endured because of the false narrative Emily had broadcast. It wasn't just a property dispute anymore. It was the systematic dismantling of our dignity. As I sat there watching Emily squirm under questioning, watching her once confident face start to fray at the edges, I didn't feel joy. I felt exhaustion. This woman had weaponized every ounce of goodwill I had ever offered her. She hadn't just manipulated the truth, she'd tried to rewrite it. My silence, my restraint had been recast as guilt. But now the truth was out, and she wasn't the hero anymore. She was exposed, vulnerable, unmasked. And the courtroom, once sympathetic, was beginning to see her for what she really was, not a desperate mother, but a cunning manipulator who thought kindness was weakness and generosity was an open wallet. I knew the verdict wouldn't come that day, but as we left the courtroom and stepped into the crisp evening air, Rachel squeezed my hand and whispered, "We're almost there." And I believed her, because for the first time in months, it felt like the tide was turning. The day of the final hearing felt surreal, like the last lap of a marathon I hadn't signed up for, but had been forced to run with bricks strapped to my chest. Rachel sat beside me, calm but unblinking, her hand in mine like a quiet anchor. The courtroom was packed tighter than before, neighbors, local reporters, even a few former friends who had been sucked into Emily's version of reality, their eyes bouncing between us like spectators waiting for a train wreck. I had rehearsed every possible version of the outcome, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer gravity of that final day. Emily arrived in a muted gray dress, her expression carefully crafted into a mask of fatigue and forced humility. Her daughter Lily wasn't there this time. Maybe she had finally seen through it all. Emily's lawyer stood with his usual confident posture, but the smugness had faded, dulled by weeks of seeing their narrative unravel piece by piece. As proceedings began, the judge wasted no time. He had clearly read every page of the evidence we had submitted. He summarized the claims: breach of lease, non-payment of rent, defamation of character, emotional harm inflicted on minors, intentional manipulation of public sentiment through false narratives. I sat perfectly still, heart thudding in my ears as our lawyer Matthew took the floor one last time. He didn't dramatize it. He didn't need to. He simply walked the court through the timeline like a seasoned narrator, peeling back layers of a deeply dishonest novel. He showed the lease agreement with Emily's signature, the frozen rent rate that had never changed, the thank you voicemail that contradicted her later accusations. Then came the forensic analysis of the fabricated email she used in her GoFundMe page. The digital fingerprints, the metadata, trail, the editing software it had been run through. Matthew explained how Emily had posted on social media about me being a wealthy predator 3 full weeks before we had even spoken about Lily's college acceptance. He showed the messages from neighbors who'd been manipulated into sharing Emily's posts and then publicly retracted their support after the truth came out. One by one, the lies collapsed like dominoes. Then came my turn. I stood up and delivered a statement I had written and rewritten a dozen times. I spoke calmly, without anger, but with deliberate precision. I told the court how I had grown up watching my parents struggle, how every property I owned represented years of sacrifice, late nights and meals skipped to stretch $1. I talked about what it meant to extend kindness to someone, only to have it weaponized. I didn't cry when I talked about my daughter being bullied because of rumors. I didn't yell when I explained how Emily had stood in my driveway and filmed my house for likes and pity clicks. But my voice cracked when I said one simple sentence: she turned my home into a target. The room went quiet. Even Emily's lawyer looked away. I ended by saying that while I understood desperation, there was a line between asking for help and declaring someone your personal ATM. Emily had crossed that line, burned the bridge, and tried to claim arson was an act of love. When I sat down, Rachel reached over and squeezed my knee. The judge took a long pause before speaking. He addressed both parties, but his gaze never left Emily. He acknowledged the financial stress of single parenting, the burden of college expenses, and the hardship of life itself. But then he said, and I will never forget it, hardship is not a license to fabricate injustice. He ruled in our favor on all counts. Emily was ordered to pay all outstanding rent immediately, plus legal fees, plus additional damages for defamation. A restraining order was issued effective immediately. She was to remove all social media posts referencing me or my family, cease all contact, and vacate the property within 30 days. The courtroom rustled as whispers broke out. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded like someone finally setting down a weight they'd carried for too long. Emily looked stunned. Her face paled as the judge's words hit her like cold water. She muttered something under her breath, probably a final plea to no one in particular, but it didn't matter anymore. The decision had been made. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to ask me for a statement. I kept walking. Rachel and I got into the car without a word. It wasn't until we were halfway home that she said softly, "It's over." But it didn't feel over, not yet. That night, I sat on our porch and stared out into the street, thinking about all the people who had jumped on Emily's bandwagon without knowing anything about me. People who thought wealth or the assumption of it meant you owed pieces of yourself to anyone who asked. But money doesn't make you invincible. It makes you a target. And the minute you say no, the gratitude evaporates and the entitlement erupts. Over the next few days, the fallout was swift. Emily's GoFundMe was flagged, investigated, and ultimately taken down. Several donors asked for refunds. The local Facebook group that had once championed her removed her posts and issued an admin apology. I didn't reply. I didn't participate in the cleanup. I had already bled enough. Our kids' school responded to our complaints, finally holding an assembly on bullying and digital misinformation. The principal called us directly to apologize for the delay. My parents, who had once hinted that maybe I should just help her out, sent a text saying we're sorry. We didn't know it had gone this far. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. Closure isn't a sudden thing. It's slow. It's quiet. It creeps in around the edges when you least expect it. I walked through that property for the last time after Emily was gone. The walls still had her daughter's hand-painted stars on the ceiling. The kitchen cabinets had that familiar creak I never got around to fixing. I stood in the living room, placed my hand on the wall, and said nothing. I didn't feel triumph. I felt relief. Exhausted, hollow, but free. On the way out, I locked the door one final time and dropped the keys into my pocket. As I turned to leave, I realized something. Emily had tried to take something from me, but in the end, she gave me something I didn't know I needed: a hardened spine, a refined radar for entitlement, and a vow that I would never again let kindness become currency. She thought I was too nice to fight back. She was wrong. It's been almost 8 months since that final court ruling, and while the legal battle is over, the emotional aftermath still lingers like smoke after a fire. Some mornings, I wake up and expect another email from Emily, another tagged post, another whisper in the community thread, and then I remember it's done. The silence is both strange and sacred. The restraining order held. She vacated the property with 2 days to spare, left the walls scratched, the yard a mess, and the carpets stained almost like a final middle finger. But I didn't care. I didn't chase her for damages. I just wanted it over. We had the place cleaned, repainted, and listed again. It rented within 2 weeks to a retired couple who said it reminded them of their first home. I told them nothing about the history. I didn't need to. Some ghosts deserve to fade quietly. Emily vanished from the public eye just as quickly as she'd arrived in it. Her supporters evaporated once the verdict became public record. There were no apology posts, no retractions, just a quiet unraveling of a story that never held truth to begin with. Her GoFundMe was taken down, and she was flagged on several forums as a cautionary tale. I don't know where she lives now. I don't ask. And yet Lily did reach out. That part surprised me. One night, about 3 months after the ruling, I opened my inbox and saw her name. My chest tightened. I almost deleted it. But something made me open it instead. Her message wasn't long, but it was raw. She apologized. Not just for what her mother did, but for the role she unknowingly played in the chaos. She said she'd believed her mother at first had genuinely thought I was the villain, until she started asking questions and hearing other sides. She admitted she hadn't known about the discounted rent, the emails, the social media manipulation. She wrote, "I thought you were the obstacle to my dreams. I didn't realize you were the one who made them possible in the first place." That line knocked the wind out of me. She said she had enrolled in a local college, instead gotten a part-time job, and was figuring things out on her own. She wanted nothing from me, just to tell the truth. I read her message twice, then again. Then I sat there for a long time staring at the screen, unsure what I even felt. Anger, sadness, relief. Maybe all of them at once. Eventually, I replied, told her I appreciated the courage it took to reach out, that I admired her decision to take responsibility for her future. I didn't offer money, I didn't offer help, but I wished her well. And I meant it. She didn't write back. I didn't expect her to. Some conversations are meant to end quietly. Life now has a new rhythm. Our kids are doing better. Emma is back to smiling at school drop-off, no longer flinching at whispers. Rachel and I have found our footing again, though it took time. There were nights where we barely spoke, not out of anger, but exhaustion, like two people who survived a storm and were still learning how to breathe normal air again. We've started going on walks in the evening, sometimes in silence, sometimes in deep conversation. We've talked about getting out of property management eventually. Maybe sell off a few homes and start something new, something that doesn't come with legal filings and entitled tenants. But for now, we're okay. We're whole. That has to be enough. Still, the community hasn't completely forgotten. Some people never apologized. They just pretend it never happened. Others reached out with quiet texts or awkward hellos at the grocery store like we were long-lost friends they'd momentarily misjudged. I don't hold grudges, but I don't forget either. I learned that the court of public opinion rarely waits for evidence. It just picks a side, shouts the loudest, and hopes it got lucky. And I learned that boundaries are more than fences or legal lines. They're emotional lifeboats. If you don't build them, people will drown you in their expectations. Sometimes I walk past that old property and feel nothing. Other times I feel a ghost of something. A flicker of betrayal, a spark of grief for the neighborly trust I used to have. But mostly I feel peace. Not triumph, not victory. Just peace. The kind that comes not from revenge, but from resilience. From knowing you didn't fold even when the world wanted you to. From realizing you can be compassionate without being compliant, generous without being gullible. The kind of peace that costs you dearly but is worth every ounce of the price. And maybe that's the real ending here. Not the courtroom victory or the social media silence, but the quiet, steady rebuilding of trust in myself. I didn't become what she said I was. I didn't let her drag me down into the mud. I stood my ground. I told the truth. And in the end, I walked away not just with my house, but with my integrity. That's the kind of wealth no one can steal. Story 2. My stepmother threatened to divorce him if he walked me down the aisle, claiming it would steal the show from my stepsister's wedding 6 months prior, so Dad stated he couldn't attend my wedding. I'll do my best to explain this without going entirely crazy, but I can't guarantee it. When I was 8 years old, my parents separated, and when I was 12, my dad remarried Amy. From day one, it was evident that Amy's 10-year-old daughter Ezra was her treasured little princess, and I was merely the kid who showed up with a bundle. My dad was so focused on making Amy happy and being the ideal stepfather to Ezra that he kind of forgot he already had a daughter. It's not like he noticed. I won't sit here and act like I was the easiest child to handle because I had a difficult divorce and occasionally behaved out, but I was 12 years old and my entire world had been upended. I had to introduce my dad to 2 new people all of a sudden, and they made it obvious that I was the outsider. Although Amy never said anything specifically hurtful to me, she had a knack of saying things that seemed kind on the surface, but were truly hurtful. As in, "Oh, Ezra is so naturally graceful," she would comment. Some females are born with it while others must put in more effort. Ezra is such a sweetheart. Unlike some kids, she never yells or becomes angry when I'm having trouble with something. My dad was so concerned with keeping Amy happy that he didn't want to upset her by defending me, so he would just let things happen if I became upset about something. Every time I tried to discuss with him how I was treated by Amy and Ezra, he would tell me that I was being overly sensitive, or that I should make a greater effort to fit in with the family. I could see what was occurring, but no one else would admit it, and that made me feel like I was going crazy. I got the leftovers, and Ezra got everything she wanted. Ezra adored the activities Amy planned for our family holidays, and they would make me feel bad for being tough when I said that I didn't want to do something. My dad would do everything in his power to attend Ezra's activities, such as school functions or recitals, but he would miss mine if Amy had other plans. Worst of all, he would always be prepared with an excuse, as if work was hectic, whether it was an unforeseen circumstance or a family duty. I continued to hope that things would improve, even though I began to realize that I was never the focus. I thought that if I worked hard enough, my dad would recognize that I was worth fighting for, so I tried really hard to be the ideal daughter and get along with Amy and Ezra as we all grew older. I had good grades. Despite the fact that we had nothing in common, I made an effort to show interest in the things that Ezra enjoyed, and I avoided getting into any problems. Because I loved my dad and wanted to be in a relationship with him, I repeatedly swallowed my injured sentiments. The problem is that I was never close to Ezra. As we grew older, it became increasingly clear that we were just 2 people who happened to share a home, despite the fact that everyone acted as though we were sisters. I was more of a tomboy who enjoyed sports, being outside, and reading, whereas she occasionally indulged in all the girly things like makeup shopping and cheerleading. Since not everyone must be great friends with their step-siblings, that was acceptable. However, Amy pretended that I was to blame for our lack of intimacy. Amy arranged a lavish celebration for Ezra's high school graduation, inviting everyone they knew. In graduation speech, my father expressed his pride in Ezra and her potential to achieve great things in college. As I sat there, I recalled how he brought me to Applebee's for supper after I graduated and ended the day. I convinced myself that it didn't matter because I was going to college on a scholarship and didn't need a huge party anyhow, therefore I was getting along just fine without it. However, the pain persisted. I actually benefited from college because it allowed me to put my family issues behind me and concentrate on my own life without feeling like I was always vying for my dad's attention. I was genuinely liked for who I was by the friends I made. I began to participate in things that I was interested in, and I began to think that perhaps I was valuable after all. Although I still see my dad occasionally and speak with him frequently, the atmosphere was changed because I was no longer living there full-time. Ezra attended college as 2, but she found it difficult to be away from home, and after her first year, transferred to a nearby institution since she missed her mother too much. Amy pretended that this was quite healthy and natural, and my dad wholeheartedly agreed with the choice. I recall thinking that they would have advised me to persevere and toughen up if I had wished to change schools because I was homesick. I established a proud life for myself after graduating from college and relocating to a new place for work. After having a fulfilling work and close friends, I ultimately met Nomad, who is now my fiancé. And to be honest, that was the best thing I've ever experienced. I don't think anyone in my family has ever understood me the way Nomad does, and he gives me the confidence to be myself. It may sound corny, but it is true. I was thrilled and eager to begin organizing our wedding when Nomad and I got engaged, so I called my dad as soon as possible to share the news. In addition to saying all the appropriate things about how thrilled he was to lead me down the aisle and how he couldn't wait to meet Nomad, he looked pleased for me. I briefly thought that perhaps we could have the father-daughter bond I had always desired. However, it seemed as though my wedding had vanished when Ezra became engaged 6 months later. Updates on Ezra's wedding preparations. Amy's assistance in organizing this lavish party and their exploration of venues that exceeded my wedding budget dominated every chat with my dad. Getting married is meant to be exciting, so I tried to be happy for Ezra, but it was difficult to ignore the fact that my dad seemed far more interested in her wedding than in mine. Last fall, Ezra got married, and it was everything Amy could have imagined. In addition to giving another of his speeches about how proud he was, how gorgeous she looked, and how fortunate her new husband was, my dad escorted Ezra down the aisle. I tried to be pleased for them as I watched, but I couldn't help but feel ill with jealousy because I knew my wedding wouldn't be anything like that. I'm not saying that I wanted the same kind of wedding because Matt and I are more laid back and are covering the majority of the costs ourselves, so we're going for something more intimate and smaller. However, I wish my dad had been half as thrilled about my special day as he was about Ezra's. I kept telling myself that it didn't matter because getting married to Nomad and beginning a life together was more important than throwing a lavish party. Thus, we decided to get married in the spring. When I began organizing everything, my father expressed his excitement and stated he couldn't wait to see me get married. Perhaps this would be our moment, and I began to grow excited. Maybe he would understand that I was his daughter too and that our bond was important if he walked me down the aisle. However, everything fell apart 2 months ago. It was far worse than I could have ever anticipated, and I still find it hard to accept what happened. I gave my dad a call to discuss certain wedding-related matters and to make sure he would be walking me down the aisle. His prolonged silence on the phone should have been my first indication that something was up. At last, he told me that he needed to discuss something with me since it was difficult and he wasn't sure how to phrase it. As I sat there, it occurs to me that he might be experiencing major health issues, financial concerns, or some other issue. However, he later informs me that Amy has threatened to divorce him if he attends my wedding and doesn't want him to attend at all. At first, his words were so crazy that I literally could not comprehend them. When I asked him to repeat it, he stated that Amy thought it was disrespectful to their family and that I was trying to steal Ezra's thunder by getting married so soon after his. What the devil does that even imply, I ask myself? I am prohibited from getting married since it would somehow lessen the significance of Ezra's wedding, which took place 6 months ago. However, things worsen. Since I'm trying to put him in a difficult situation and make him choose between his family. My dad claims that Amy also believes I'm manipulating him by asking him to lead me down the aisle. I couldn't believe what I was hearing at that time, so I lost it. For example, it is manipulative to ask my father to lead me down the aisle at my wedding when I am his biological daughter. Amy was being stupid and controlling, so I told him it was really crazy and that he needed to confront her by telling her that he was attending his daughter's wedding regardless of her feelings. He became defensive and claimed that I didn't comprehend how difficult this was for him, that Amy was merely attempting to keep her baby safe, and that perhaps we could come to an agreement. For example, what precisely was the intended compromise that he would attend my wedding but not accompany me on my journey? That he would depart after walking me halfway down the aisle? That in order to avoid having my wedding too close to Ezra's, I ought to put it off for another year? It was unbelievable to me that he was even implying that there might be some wiggle room. When he said that he hoped I would realize how important his marriage to Amy was to him, and that he couldn't risk losing her over this, he was essentially telling me that his wife was more important to him than his daughter, and that he was choosing her over me without even attempting to defend our relationship. That was the part that truly broke my heart. I couldn't even form words because I was so wounded and enraged that I hung up on him. I sobbed and tried to figure out what I was meant to do for the remainder of the day. Nomad was incredible. He simply held me while I broke, assured me that we would work things out together and that our wedding would still be ideal since we would be getting married regardless of what transpired with my dad. However, I kept thinking about how proud my dad looked when he walked Ezra down the aisle just 6 months prior, and how he had expressed his love for her in that speech. He was now informing me that his wife didn't want him at my wedding, so he couldn't even attend. I understood that this had nothing to do with Amy. It had to do with the fact that my father had never truly stood up for me, picked me, or given me the same sense of importance as his new family. The following day, I gave him another call. I was more at ease, but I was also overacting as though nothing was wrong. I informed him that I would stop pleading with him to be my father, and that he was choosing to permanently break off our relationship if he did not attend my wedding. He broke down in tears, telling me that he loved me and that he was dying, but that he had no other choice. He knew exactly what to do, I assured him. It would be difficult, so he simply didn't want to do it. He said that perhaps after some time had gone, we could resolve our differences, and that he hoped that one day I would realize that he never meant things to be this way. I informed him that we couldn't work things out because I was sick of being the daughter who always got the leftovers, had to fight for the few remaining bits of attention, and was supposed to be understanding when he picked other people over me. I informed him that he had already made up his mind. He now had to deal with it, and I didn't want him to get in touch with me after my wedding. He was pleading with me not to do this, claiming that I was going too far, and that removing him from my life would not make things better. He obviously hadn't cared about mine for years, so I was past worrying about his sentiments. The worst thing is that I believe a part of me always knew this day would arrive because I kept expecting he would change after he had been revealing himself to me for years. However, after escorting Ezra down the aisle, he informed me that he was unable to do the same for me. It felt like the last evidence that I had never meant as much to him as I would have liked to think. I therefore informed all of my wedding providers that I would be walking down the aisle to marry the guy I love alone, without a father-daughter dance or anybody else accompanying me. To be honest, after I made that choice, I felt like a big burden had been lifted, because I understood that I could have the wedding of my dreams without my dad's presence or approval. It was very kind of Nomad's father to volunteer to take me down the aisle. However, I made the decision to stroll by myself. All of this has been made possible by my mother's tremendous support. She is assisting me with last-minute wedding preparations and expressed her pride in me for advocating for myself and refusing to let my father treat me as like I am unimportant. She said that she isn't shocked this happened because my dad has always been a people pleaser who, even if it means hurting the people he should love the most, does whatever makes his life easier. I'm truly looking forward to marrying Nomad and beginning our life together. And the wedding is in 3 weeks. However, I would be dishonest if I claimed that I wasn't still upset and hurt over my dad's entire predicament. In an effort to urge me to make amends with my dad before the wedding, some of my family have been phoning and texting me. I don't think they realize that he ceased to be family to me the moment he put Amy's feelings ahead of his own daughter's wedding, even though they keep claiming that family is family and that I'll regret not having him there. Since he is the one who started this whole thing, I'm sick of everyone pretending like I should be the bigger person and forgive him. He keeps sending me lengthy texts about how much he loves me, how sorry he is, and how he never wanted things to go this way. And that is what truly irritates me. However, he hasn't stated that he has decided not to attend the wedding, as if he wants me to forgive him and keep our relationship going. He is unwilling to do anything different, though. I can't continue to accept excuses without behavior change. I was sick of receiving his texts and letting them spoil my day, so last week I banned his number. I understand it may sound chilly, but rather than being pulled into my dad's problems all the time, I should be concentrating on getting married and my future with Nomad. Since I don't have to wait for him to text me or worry about him changing his mind at the last minute, the silence has really been rather lovely. This weekend is the day of my bridal shower. For me, my mother is tossing it. Nomad's mother and sisters will also be present along with all of my pals. Since there will be a lot of people who genuinely love me and want to celebrate with me, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I suppose I'm asking if it's too harsh of me to permanently cut my dad out of my life because of this. Because there are days when I am totally sure of my choice. On other days, I question whether I'm destroying a connection that might one day be mended either by declaring my dad dead to me and removing him from my life forever because he preferred my stepfamily over accompanying me to my wedding. Update 1. I'm shocked to see myself back here, but a lot has happened since I last posted. And I really need to get everything out of my head since I'm going crazy right now. I appreciate everyone who assured me I wasn't insane for being outraged about this scenario in their comments on my initial post. It truly made me feel less isolated. My wedding took place last Saturday and it was flawless. I thought I was done with my dad's drama, but obviously the world had other ideas for me, even though the days before it were absolutely crazy, and I'm still digesting everything that happened. 2 weeks ago, the bridal shower was fantastic and just what I needed. Just myself and every woman that genuinely loves and supports me throughout my life, celebrating and having a blast. My mother was overjoyed. Additionally, I feel pretty good about the family I'm marrying into because Nomad's family has essentially adopted me as their own. There is only pure happiness and enthusiasm for the wedding, no drama or tension. However, my phone started ringing at around 7 in the morning last Monday, which was precisely 1 week before my wedding. I had blocked my dad's usual number, so I didn't recognize the number when he called. He informed me that he was staying at a motel that he had broken up with Amy, and that he wanted to attend my wedding and accompany me down the aisle. After all, that was the exact last thing I expected to hear, and now I'm here in my pajamas in my kitchen trying to comprehend this information. I questioned him about what transpired and the reasons for his decision. It seems like Amy's feelings on the entire wedding issue had been deteriorating. She continued saying that I was being selfish and that I was attempting to destroy Ezra's marriage by getting married so soon after hers, which is completely nonsensical, but whatever. She went on to imply that my dad would choose her and Ezra above me forever and shut me out of his life if he truly loved them. She advised him to give me a call and inform me that he was choosing his biological family above me, that I was no longer welcome in their home, and that he never wanted to see me again. It seems that my dad finally reached his breaking point when he understood that Amy wasn't merely asking him to skip my wedding. She was requesting that he permanently ruin his relationship with me. He claimed to have informed Amy that he was unable to do so, that he had to find a way to attend my wedding because I was his daughter no matter what. She went totally crazy and began yelling at him, saying that he was picking me above her and that she was tired of being married to a man who didn't prioritize his wife. Then she said that she was divorcing him and urged him to leave the house. I was somewhat relieved that he had finally defended me, but I was also perplexed because I had already come to terms with the fact that I would be walking down the aisle without him there just 6 days before my wedding. After I told him that, he began to cry more and begged me to allow him attend the wedding. He said he wanted to make amends even though he recognized he had made a mistake. Since I had already grieved the loss of having my dad at my wedding, and had spent weeks mentally preparing myself for his absence, I was at a loss for words when he abruptly wished to attend at the last minute. Since Amy had prevented him from picking both, I felt as though he was now solely choosing me, which infuriated me. Not because he truly understood that I ought to have been his top focus from the beginning. I promised to give him a call back since I wanted some time to consider it. The following few hours were spent discussing my options with my mother and Nomad. Nomad stated that he would back my choice and that it was all up to me. According to my mother, I should exercise caution when allowing my dad to re-enter. And if things didn't work out with Amy, he would hurt me again. However, when all of this drama started, I started seeing a therapist, and she helped me balance what I truly wanted with what I felt I should desire. I came to the realization that I still wanted my dad to attend my wedding in spite of everything that had transpired. If his decision to be there was truly motivated by his love for me rather than the fact that his other choice had been taken away. I then gave him a call back and told him that although he was welcome to attend the wedding, we needed to talk seriously about our relationship and how it had come to be. He consented to get coffee with me the following day so we could discuss everything. I had to tell him how much he had hurt me over the years and how our relationship had been harmed by his preference for Amy and Ezra over me long before the wedding drama began, which made the conversation extremely difficult. He listened, wept, and acknowledged that he had failed me as a father, and that he had ignored our relationship because he was too preoccupied with trying to make his new marriage work. He claimed that he realized he had already lost a great deal of time with me, and that he couldn't handle the idea of losing me forever when Amy begged him to take me out of his life entirely. He expressed regret for not defending me sooner and for giving me the impression that Ezra and Amy were more significant than I was. It wasn't a flawless chat, and I don't believe that one exchange can make up for years of disappointment and grief. However, it seemed like my dad was finally paying attention to me and seeing the impact his actions had on me for the first time in a long time. Despite everything, he is still my father, and I love him, so I made the decision to have him at my wedding. Last Saturday, he led me down the aisle, and it was simultaneously perfect, complex, and emotional. Up until it actually happened, I was anxious because I thought he may change his mind again, but he was there. Before he gave me to Nomad, he told me he loved me and appeared pleased and proud. The actual wedding was everything and more than I could have imagined. Nomad is quite attractive. The weather was great. Our entire family and circle of friends joined us in celebration, and I felt totally content and at ease for the first time in months. I felt like the luckiest woman alive as we laughed, danced, and ate cake. My father spoke briefly at the reception. He expressed his regret that it had taken him so long to understand what was most essential in life and his pride in the lady I had grown into. He expressed his gratitude to me for giving him another opportunity to be the father I deserved and his commitment to mending our relationship. Although I believe there will always be a part of me that recalls how he nearly chose Amy over me, it felt like perhaps we could start over and create something greater together. It wasn't the same as if none of this drama had ever occurred. However, I discovered yesterday that Amy and Ezra have been telling everyone in their family and circle of friends that I ended my dad's marriage and that I'm a self-centered, cunning individual who couldn't abide that Ezra had a lovely wedding, so I had to destroy her family to cheer myself up. They seemed to be claiming that I issued an ultimatum to my father, made him decide between Amy and me, and claimed that I was the cause of their divorce. That's not what happened at all, and I'm so furious that I can hardly see. They are portraying me as the bad guy. It was Amy who insisted that my dad permanently remove me from his life. I'm now concerned that other members of my extended family may accept their version of events and believe that I'm a marriage-destroying house wrecker. When my dad learned what they were saying, he gave me a call. I urged him not to bother since I don't want to go into it, but he was enraged and stated he was going to correct everyone's records. Situation with Amy and Ezra, she said. All I want to think about is my new marriage, establishing a life with Nomad while avoiding further trouble. I keep wondering if my dad will stand by his choice of me, though, because it's difficult not to feel hurt and upset that even after everything, Amy and Ezra are still attempting to cast me as the evil guy and themselves as the victims in this scenario. When our extended family is being pressured to choose a side by Amy and Ezra, Nomad believes that since the people who really matter know the truth, and those who don't know me well enough to see through their falsehoods aren't worth worrying about. I should just concentrate on our marriage and not worry about what Amy and Ezra are saying. It's difficult to know that people might have negative opinions of me based on untrue information, even though I believe he's probably correct. Since many of you were interested in my story and gave me such wise counsel, I wanted to give you all an update on how things worked out. After all, I'm married now, and that's what matters most. Update 2. I didn't intend to give another update, but since my last post, things have become so much stranger and more confusing that I feel compelled to discuss what's been going on. Because to be honest, I'm not sure if I'm managing the issue appropriately anymore. Nomad and I have been enjoying married life and attempting to adjust to our new normal together for the past 6 weeks or so since my wedding. I've been gradually repairing my relationship with my dad, and it's been going better than I anticipated. For example, he has been trying to be more helpful and present during our frequent phone conversations. However, Ezra texted me last week to ask if we could get together for coffee so we could discuss. I honestly spent 10 minutes staring at my phone in amazement, trying to determine whether or not I was having hallucinations. After all the commotion with Amy and my dad, I honestly thought I would never hear from Ezra again, and we haven't spoken since before my wedding. When I showed Nomad the text, he assumed it was a trap or that Ezra was trying to trick me in some way. However, I was interested in what she had to say, so I agreed to meet her close to my place. I'm happy I did, since her explanation of what had transpired fundamentally altered my perspective. When I saw Ezra, she looked awful. Not at all what I expected to hear, she began by expressing regret for the wedding scenario and for the way her mother had treated me over the years. She went on to tell me that Amy had been trying to create a lasting rift between my dad and me by manipulating the situation, and that her mom had been lying to both of us about what the other person was saying and doing. Amy had apparently told Ezra that I was trying to turn my dad against their family and that I had been saying horrible things about them, but it was completely untrue. This is the really confusing portion, though, and I'm still having trouble understanding it. Since Amy had been having an affair with a man from her workplace for more than a year, Ezra said that she had already planned to divorce my dad and was using the wedding drama as a pretext to dissolve the marriage without having to confess to her infidelity. Ezra says, "In order for Amy to leave my dad and steal half of everything without anybody seeing that she was the one who would ruin the marriage by having an affair, she had been searching for an excuse to paint him as the villain. She saw a chance to force my dad to choose between his family when I told her I was engaged, and she could use that as an excuse to dissolve their marriage regardless of his decision. Amy would have told everyone that my dad was a bad father who left his daughter behind when he decided to attend my wedding, according to Ezra, if he had declined to attend. Rather, she had the opportunity to act like the victim and claim that he'd choose me over his wife. In any case, Amy ended up being the wrong person rather than the unfaithful husband. All of this made me sick because it implied that Amy had been manipulating my relationship with my father for months and was using my wedding as a pretext to break up with him. Ezra claimed to have recently learned about the affair and Amy's manipulation after listening to her mother on the phone with the other man, discussing how well things had gone. Ezra told me all of this while crying, and she expressed her regret at not recognizing her mother's wrongdoing and for failing to defend me during the years that Amy mistreated me. She claimed that although she had always knew her mother disliked me, she had assumed it was simply typical step-family conflict. Ezra then said something that really affected me. She had always been envious of my connection with my dad because despite Amy's attempts to persuade him to give Ezra preference, she could see that he loved me differently since I was his biological daughter. She claimed that Amy had tried so hard to sour relations with us because she had been envious of that as well. I was so upset, hurt, and perplexed that I didn't know how to respond to any of this. Amy had been actively trying to ruin our relationship the entire time, while I had been blaming myself for months and years for not being good enough to get my dad's love and attention. Ezra was discovering that her mother was not who she believed her to be, and I felt sorry for her as well. Ezra asked if I could pardon her for believing her mother's falsehoods about me and for not speaking up sooner. Now that we both understood the truth, she expressed her desire to attempt to build a genuine relationship with me. Since Ezra and I have never been close, I'm not sure if we can create anything from nothing, therefore I'm not sure how I feel about it. However, I'm grateful that she told the truth. My dad was distraught when I told him all Ezra had told me, as he had come to the conclusion that Amy had been using me as a piece in her game and manipulating him for years. He claimed that a lot of things suddenly made sense, such as why Amy would become agitated whenever he spent time with me, and why she always seemed to have a breakdown whenever I experienced a significant life event. Since Amy was the one who cheated and ruined the marriage, my dad has filed for divorce and is attempting to shield his assets from her. However, it seems that she is asserting that he left the marriage when he decided to attend my wedding. I don't really grasp all of the legal jargon, which is incredibly convoluted. However, despite being the one who had an affair, Amy is essentially still attempting to paint herself as the victim. I've come to the realization that while I was justified in feeling upset about the way I've been treated throughout the years, I was holding the wrong person partially responsible. Amy was deliberately trying to control us both and drive us apart, but my dad really ought to have stood up for me more and seen what she was doing. On the one hand, I'm happy that my dad and I are reestablishing our relationship, so I'm trying to figure out how to proceed. However, I'm also upset that he allowed Amy to control him for so long, and that he nearly picked her over me. Before I can make a decision about how much I want him to be engaged in my life moving ahead, I feel like I need some time to process all of this new knowledge. Throughout everything, Nomad has been incredible. He continues telling me that I can take as much time as I need to figure out what I want, and that I don't have to make any major decisions about my relationships with my dad or Ezra just now. My therapist has also been beneficial in helping me process all of the complex feelings I'm experiencing in relation to this entire situation. I suppose my current question is if I ought to give my dad and Ezra a better shot. Regardless of who is actually at fault, I now know that Amy was trying to manipulate the situation, or that the harm done over the years is too great to undo. I suppose I'm requesting guidance once more regarding if I ought to be more receptive to mending these connections. Now that I am aware of the reality, should I be extra careful about reintegrating those who have harmed me into my life, even if they were also being manipulated? In any case, I wanted to provide this update. Since, as I know some of you were interested in what transpired, things have drastically changed since I last posted. I would be very interested in hearing anyone's opinions on how to deal with repairing ties with people who have harmed you, but were also being manipulated. I appreciate you reading these lengthy updates and your unwavering support during this insane adventure. Having people who are sympathetic to my situation and who don't think I'm insane for not knowing how to deal with it all means more than you can imagine. Story 3. Refused to alter my plans for my autistic nephew's birthday supper. But when he takes his wife on their ideal vacation, my brother expected me to move in and keep his son full-time. Background. In our early 30s, my sister and I had an older brother. He is married for the second time. I have a 15-year-old nephew named Connor from his first marriage. Connor has autism, when he was born. The village, at the time, was the sister-in-law's family. The village also included my parents. I wasn't, nor was my sister. This led to numerous disputes until I informed my parents that they could either respect my boundaries and I would remain in their presence, or they could have my brother and his family, and I would go and see. They concurred. Due to marital issues, including his ex-wife's insistence that my sister and I assist my brother, eventually filed a divorce. I was sorry for him. Continue to do so. However, I had no intention of changing my position. Neither did my sister. I recently accepted a new work opportunity near home after living out of state for a while. I chose to take my parents, sister, and brother out to supper at my favorite KVK restaurant because it came with a wonderful bonus. Everything was fine because my parents confirmed that my nephew wasn't spending the week with my brother. A week or two before I returned home, my brother called to let me know that his current wife would be out of town with her sisters and that his ex had an important matter to attend to. He also mentioned that he had Connor the following week. I told him not to worry and offered to cover for him for our dinner night if he wanted to call his usual babysitter for Connor. No, he responded. Since Connor becomes overstimulated, he wanted to bring him to the meal and asked if we could move the location. No, this was my dinner, I said. I'm footing the bill. I'm heading to my preferred location. "Your nephew definitely isn't able to handle an environment like that," he remarked. "Yes, I know," I said. "I'm offering to pay for a babysitter for that evening because of this." "I'll just bring Connor with me," he said. "He's free to do that, but I'm not going," I said. "He and our parents will be the only ones present." He informed me that was messed up and that he would simply take Connor outdoors till he calmed down if he became overstimulated. I reminded him that Connor had a breakdown the previous time we went to a KVK location, so they had to leave. My parents typically leave to assist at my brother's house since they always feel horrible about Connor. "I don't want that to happen," I said. That was the last thing I wanted to worry about while enjoying a wonderful dinner. He hung up after telling me to go fuck myself. We had dinner together. Myself, my parents, and my sister. My brother failed to appear. The meal was pleasant. Although my parents acknowledged they wished my brother had attended, they still found it enjoyable. I concurred. Then they expressed their wish that my nephew had also attended. I disagreed. According to what I mentioned, my brother would have probably left after 30 to 40 minutes and they would have followed him. They concurred, but stated I should have simply dealt with it and allowed him to come nevertheless. "That seems like a solid excuse for me not to do that," I said. After that, we didn't speak much that evening. "I've previously watched Connor," Aita added. "Even now, if my brother needs to do something, I'll monitor him for a couple of hours. However, I don't keep an eye on him all day or all night. He is not at all a horrible kid, and it is not his fault. But my brother and parents, especially his ex-wife, would take a mile if you gave them an inch, so I had to set limits." After high school, they wanted my sister and I to remain in the area so we could assist with babysitting, but I had no intention of doing so. Although I wanted to see both of them before I left, I didn't say I was sorry for wanting to eat at my favorite restaurant and have it my way for just one night. Since it's peaceful and doesn't annoy my nephew, we essentially go to the same neighborhood location whenever my brother wants to eat supper. Additionally, it's his obsession with food. That's all right. I attend those meals, but I wanted to eat at a place I liked. One update. First of all, I wanted to express my gratitude to everyone for their feedback, no matter how positive or negative. Even the ones that referred to me as a jerk were read by me. Absolutely true. Before I left, I did get to visit my brother and Connor, but I mostly just played with Connor and struck up a conversation with my brother. I made the decision to give my brother a call today in an attempt to smooth things out and acquire more information. After 5 minutes or so of conversation, I brought up the topic. I apologized to him if it seemed like I was being unduly cruel or exclusive to Connor, but I thought I had the right to celebrate any way I saw fit. He expressed regret for his outburst, saying that in retrospect, he saw that Connor would have had a terrible time and that it would have been a huge waste of my money. Whether Connor ate or not, the cost of the location we went to was roughly $80 per person or $40. All he wanted was for him to be present as well. I informed him that going forward on special occasions like my birthday, I would be more than happy to take Connor out to lunch with the family to a place he enjoys so he can have a good time, followed by dinner at a restaurant I want to go to, and I would cover the cost of a babysitter or his mother. My brothers are able to observe him. He inquired if Connor would be welcome at the dinner as well. I replied that he wouldn't be invited because he doesn't do well in situations like that, and I still intend to have CBC's Hot Pot Sushi Gourmet Dining. Sound, fragrances, light, and environment. For this reason, I suggested that we all have lunch the day before so that we can all celebrate, and he would be fine with it. However, I was certain that I wanted to vacation somewhere I enjoyed without any worries for my birthday or anything similar to another promotion. I also mentioned that prior to my move, he only took us out to lunch once every month. Connor was always taken care of by either my parents or him. I went to practically all of them and had no issues with that. I wanted something for myself this time. Although he wasn't thrilled, he thought it sounded excellent and believed Connor would like it as well. As one of you advised, he also looked into obtaining sunglasses for bright, overstimulating surroundings. Then, since I'm closer to home, I knew I would eventually be asked the question he had for me. He inquired about my plans to become a more active uncle. Yes, but not in the manner he most likely desires, I replied. I replied that I would be delighted to visit his home and spend some time with him. In addition to providing him with meals that he enjoys his wife, and Connor also provide him with occasional babysitting, so that he might go to a movie or have dinner with his wife. However, unlike my parents, I wasn't going to be a babysitter on call. Because he and his wife wanted to take an impromptu trip, he has dropped Connor off at their house on multiple occasions for a week-long weekend with little warning. He and Connor are both allergic, and I'm in the process of adopting a cat, so I informed him that wasn't going to happen with me. When I lived with my parents, I was not permitted to have a cat, which was okay because it was their home and it wouldn't be fair to my brother and Connor who visited frequently. Therefore, it was not an option for me to be dropped off at my new location. Fortunately, he avoided bringing up the subject and responded, "It's okay, Mom and Dad don't mind," adding that he missed spending time with me and was glad I could spend more time with Connor. Thus, everything went as smoothly as I had imagined. I'm thrilled. I'll be returning home in a few weeks, and once again, I appreciate your counsel. Criticism. Revision to May 25th, 2025. Hello. Me once again. Life has other ideas, even though I had hoped I wouldn't have to post here again. For a new job, I, 31M, relocated back to LA from Texas. My brother, 40 AM, and my mom reside here, his spouse, and my 16-year-old nephew, Connor. Even though Connor, who has autism, has come a long way since he was 10, he still faces many challenges. He doesn't speak. Stims suffers meltdowns a lot of the time. The only people that can truly soothe him are my parents, my brother, his wife, and his ex-wife. Once or twice a month, I usually watch him so that my brother and his wife can hang out or go to the movies. It's always at their house, and I don't watch him overnight or for numerous days in a row. My brother and I have gotten along well since our last dispute. We've made significant progress in repairing our relationship, and he hasn't really pushed limits about babysitting. But recently, something happened that has caused friction between us. Recently, my brother received word that he had been chosen to travel abroad for a conference. Although they won't cover his wife's airfare, the corporation has no issues with him staying in a hotel for 10 days, if she stays in the room with him and he covers her flight and other expenses. I'm glad my brother was given this chance. Childcare is the problem. The conference coincides with my sister's birthday celebration, which will take place in New York City for a week. My parents assured my sister more than a year ago that nothing is refundable. This is what they do. Connor's biological mother, his ex-wife, will also be out of town on business. That leaves me. He contacted me to ask questions and to clarify everything. No, I told him, but I gave a list of reasons why I wouldn't. 1. It's around 90 minutes from where I live, in terms of distance. Although it's not that far, traffic makes many things more difficult than they need to be. When I'm watching him, I don't mind making the drive once or twice a month, but I don't want to do it 10 days in a row. Connor is unable to visit my home because to my cat's allergy. In addition, I have fragile items lying around the house. I don't. Additionally, Connor would still be in school, so in order to do it logistically, I would probably need to request PTO. 2. About 6 hours was the longest I've ever watched Connor. Near the end, he had a breakdown that I couldn't stop, and I was only saved by my brother and his wife returning 20 minutes later. I don't think I could do it for 10 days in a row. 3. Even though it may sound self-serving, I don't want to create a precedent by watching him overnight even once. I'm sure my brother and his spouse would try to force it on me once more. That is not something I want to happen. I'm content with our current arrangement, which involves me spending time with him, my brother, and our parents once or twice a month. However, I wouldn't think twice about keeping an eye on him in an emergency, but that's a whole other matter. I told him all of this. He was not content. He attacked me, saying he assumed that because I was back, he could count on me to do this. As I have previously stated, his wife would really like to go on this trip, but I am not a babysitter on call. I apologized, but I'm not going to do this. I replied that I would be delighted to go assist her over the weekend. To give her a break, he hangs out with Connor while he's not here. but I won't squander 8 days of paid time off and jeopardize my own mental health for 10 days to monitor him for a non-emergency. After saying a few hurtful things to me, he hung up. Surprisingly, my parents supported me when he included them in the family group chat. I've never watched Connor overnight, and his wife doesn't have to go on this trip, but they thought it would be a really great gesture if I did. Since then, we haven't really spoken. I'm sorry his wife can't go, but I don't think I'll be able to manage Connor for 10 days either. Update for Aita as of May 31st, 2025. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who gave advice. Knowing that I wasn't out of line was a huge relief, and I truly appreciate it. I sent my brother a mail. He has 2 choices, I said. He works with the local agency care facilities, or he and his wife stay at home and supervise Connor. I check on him over the weekend and apologize if I'm not using the proper terminology to get him respite care while they're away. I wouldn't be keeping an eye on him, and I wouldn't listen to him about it. His wife phoned me and said, I understand how she feels about other people watching him overnight, and I understand how his mom feels too. This place is on her bucket list, although she has never been there before. I acknowledged this and stated that I assumed she would be staying at home with Connor. Perhaps she and my brother could take Connor there in the future. I interrupted my brother when he attempted to speak, saying that I didn't give a damn about what he had to say. I'm not interested in it. I once more directed them to government agencies and neighborhood groups that support parents of children with special needs, as some of you mentioned, but I didn't really go anywhere. I hung up after saying good luck, since I was so exhausted by everything. I created a group chat with him and his spouse and informed them that I would be traveling to see them once or twice a month from now on, which requires that one of them be present. I'm no longer watching Connor by myself. This strikes me as a decent balance between not being a caretaker and still being able to spend time with Connor. I informed them that while we might be able to return to our previous situation in the future, it is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Both of them wrote back paragraphs expressing their regret, but since they were at a loss for what to do, they reasoned that perhaps I could do it for them, that this might be their second honeymoon, and that they should continue to watch him for a day or 2 every month, that I would even be paid for it. I informed them that no amount of money was worth it. I'm not treated fairly. Connor isn't treated fairly. He's not my son. They own him, that they must get him used to care and begin working with agencies right now. Additionally, other people are observing him because our parents are aging and will soon no longer be available. In response, my brother said he and his spouse would initiate the process and include his ex as well. What will they do, though, if that doesn't work? It's on them, I told them. They're crazy if they think I'm going to do for them what my parents do, but I'll gladly accompany them in their investigation into groups and advantages. I shut it down when his wife asked if I would think about receiving training and learning how to take care of Connor the way they do. Being the entertaining uncle that comes over and hangs around makes me more than delighted. However, I cherish my freedom and will not allow it to be jeopardized. In the end, they both simply gave me emojis of the thumbs up. His wife said they would meet me in 2 weeks to hang out and that she would stay at home with Connor instead of coming on the vacation. At least I'm not responsible for keeping an eye on him, and someone who can soothe him is. We'll see what happens next. In order to improve their quality of life and protect a situation like this from ever happening again, I will try my hardest to keep encouraging them to widen their network and look for more programs and solutions that can help them with Connor. Work on the next story. My best friend stayed late to support me and helped me every day. He then said that he had been attracted to me from the beginning, but I had unintentionally turned him down. I recently relocated to the city at the age of 25, and I must say that I was quite happy to make a buddy. During our lunches and breaks together, my coworker 29M and I grew close, and he became my best buddy at work. After a while, he began inviting me to join his buddies at events like movies and concerts, and it was friendly the entire time, as if I never understood the atmosphere. He wanted to know. We even started going for runs together and occasionally rode together. We began exchanging reels or videos and simply communicating all day long. After that, he began visiting me because we had previously enjoyed watching White Lotus together. So we decided to watch it together. However, he never made any romantic references, touched me, flirted, or presented me to others by stating, "Here's my friend for my job." In order to prepare for the next day, I frequently have to stay late. He began progressively offering to stay and assist me, leaving himself out of things to do so even when our other coworkers would go out for drinks. I began to sense the mood at that point. I even confided in him at one time about how difficult it was for me to move away from my family. I told him that I felt bad about leaving my parents and losing out on important time with them, as well as about leaving my sister, who is 11 years old, and missing important life events. If you didn't know, I'm the oldest sister. He truly helped me through it and was quite understanding. Then one day I asked him, "Why are you doing this?" as he was assisting me in setting up a conference room. "For example, you are under no obligation to do this. It is completely unrelated to your work." When he responded, "Well, when you like someone, you do things for them," he kind of opened the floodgates. And I thought, what? What are you saying? "Well, in case you didn't know, I have feelings for you," he said. I was perplexed, I thought. Since when I asked him, "Well, I liked you right away when I first saw you," he added, which made me even more perplexed. Why didn't they ask me out right away? "I guess I just wanted to get to know you first anyway," he added. "So would you like to go on a real date?" he asked. And I became quite alarmed. When my fear of commitment took over, I simply stated, "I don't think that's a good idea," and declined the date. I became quite nervous and afraid. When something is about to happen, I've always run away. After that, he abruptly stopped talking, and until we departed, everything was awkward and quiet. The biggest regret, though, is that he hasn't communicated with me since. He has been ignoring me for the past 2 days. Hard. No eye contact, no text. Even at lunch, I was unable to locate him. "What about the date?" I asked him when I eventually approached him. "Never mind," he said. Ignore it and turned to leave. Was my shot missed? Would he prefer that I pursue it further because I'm into it now that I've given it some consideration and considered what we might be? Since he is the more laid-back, soft-spoken type, I must admit that I always felt he was a great person and just what I needed. I also adore the cause. I always hoped to find someone who would be more compatible with me because I grew up with a fiery father who had a very short fuse. I mean, there's a reason why our friendship works so well, but I honestly didn't anticipate that he would perceive me in that way. As if I hadn't permitted myself to go there at all. Even though I didn't mean to, I believe that by turning down his offer of a date, I offended him. Does it appear like I've put him off being with me, or do I still have a chance to make things right? May 26th, 2025 update. I want to start by thanking everyone for their excellent advice. Thank you so much. However, the most frequent advice I received was to go be truthful and set up a date with him. I therefore desired to do it, but in a more private location. Feeling brave, I went to his apartment, grabbed his favorite Wingstop, and knocked. He seemed so surprised that I would pay to have a video of his face. In any case, I asked whether it was okay if I entered. Despite some hesitation, he said yes. After that, we sat down and I went over what I had written in this post. How I was shocked and afraid, and how I just flipped out. I'm afraid I'll lose my one and only friend if I move away from my family. I was afraid that having me might turn out to be a better notion than having me in reality. I informed him that after giving the concept some thought, I am very into it and can see how beneficial we are to one another. I expressed my gratitude to him for everything he had done for me and assured him that my bad reaction was entirely my fault. He then apologized after I concluded my speech. I can't handle this man. "Okay, I'm also sorry," he said. "To ice you out was not my intention. I simply needed some time and was disappointed. Else I would have resumed our conversation. For example, I would still choose to be your friend. And that was a huge relief because I saw comments from others suggesting that he wasn't your buddy or being immature if he was only hanging out with you to get in your pants. He truly demonstrated that he is amazing and that he is not. Grin. Another thing is that some remarked, well, you should just leave him alone or you just missed the attention if you didn't like him romantically at all. Since our relationship seemed so platonic to me, I honestly didn't even consider the possibility. Well, we're just friends, I said. He would have flirted, exhibited interest, or been more tactile if he had been interested. I simply came to terms with the fact. It came as a great surprise when he said that he did like me. In any case, we have formally made the decision to try it. We discussed our life goals in great detail, and they are very much in line with one another. I admit that even though I'm really delighted, I'm still afraid. However, I keep telling myself that I will regret not trying. I still feel like I have some making up to do, so I'm preparing a date that includes all of his favorite things that I'm working on in my back pocket. Oh, and it was wonderful when we finally shared a kiss. Grin.